everyone. I'm Dr. Hinson.
And I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. And we are here for you with our episode analysis of episode 2 of Netflix's The Crown. This is entitled Hyde Park Corner. For those of you that might be just joining us, we are covering seasons 1 and 2 of The Crown in our continuing effort to use our academic and professional expertise to unpack fascinating
popular culture stories.
Pop culture stories. We've already done The Handmaid's Tale seasons 1 and 2, which you can find on our YouTube playlist, and we'll be adding this to it. So we're back talking about The Crown. We're fascinated. We're enthralled. Hyde Park Corner. So we have Elizabeth and Philip embark on their Commonwealth tour.
They started in Kenya.
In Kenya, as it was apparently called by some people in the 1950s. My notes literally say Philip is an ass, colonialism is awful. So I think that pretty much covers where we're going on this tour. We have Winston Churchill, Prime Minister, forming an attachment with a young woman who works at the office. We're not sure why.
A seemingly appropriate one, though.
Yes, he feels drawn to her.
I think like a father-daughter situation.
Yeah, it's not inappropriate. It's definitely a positive kind of work attachment. And we learn that our dear Princess Margaret is having an affair with Group Captain Peter Townsend.
Father and husband, who was her father's, like, bodyguard?
Assistant? We don't
mark?
know.
He wears a uniform? We don't know.
He helps the king.
Yeah.
We know this. He helps the king. So we learn a bit more about these relationships. Margaret's relationship with her father. Foreign Secretary Eden goes to the king and says, Churchill's really ill. Mentally, he's unstable. He's not interested in running the government. We should replace him.
And for any Americans watching this who are unfamiliar with British government, the monarch is not allowed to do that. No. So a constitutional monarchy, which is what the British government is very separation of powers. Mm-hmm. It's the head of state and the head of the church is the crown. Mm-hmm. It is not necessarily like ceremonial in the way that I think a lot of people assume it now. There is still power there. There are still decisions that are made, things like that. But the seat of government is independent.
Correct.
So the crown is the will of God, and the prime minister is the will of the people, is how it's frequently explained to me. Mm-hmm. So for Eden to decide to schmooze,
try and convince the king that he needs to literally outstep his role.
And the king says, well, King George can't do that. And Eden says, well, I would hope that Albert Windsor could do that. Yeah. And the king looks at him and goes, Albert Windsor's been dead for a long time. His brother murdered him. Yeah. Which was like one of actually my favorite lines.
Yeah, then you feel really bad for the king because you realize that, this wasn't his choice either. He was the second born son. He never thought he was going to be king.
See the King's Speech, by the way, Colin Firth.
So good.
Explains all of this.
But for those of you that don't know, we do find out pretty early on in this season, but we haven't quite yet, but they do reference it a lot. His older brother, David, who became King Edward, abdicated the throne even before his coronation because he had fallen in love with an American woman named Wallis Simpson, who was a divorcee.
3 times.
And he wanted to marry her, and he wanted her to be recognized, and a whole bunch of pushback from the church, which the king is the head of in England, and refused to give up his relationship with Wallis Simpson and abdicated his throne, thus thrusting Albert into the position of king, which he was not born nor trained for. So that is where he finds himself in, and he tells Eden, stuff it. I'm not stepping in on this.
It's not right.
Figure out your own government.
Because George, I think because he didn't have any time to really think about becoming king or prepare for becoming king, he falls back on the rules. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't know what else to do. Sure. It's not in his instinct to be a leader, which is really clear in how he goes about things. It's not in his instincts to do this. He wasn't raised to do it, and so the rules are his safety net.
Yeah, and
so Eden wants him to violate the safety net, and the king, knowing that he literally only has one lung and is coughing up blood like it's his job, is like, hey, guess what? Not going to, because I need Churchill to steal my daughter, correct? In his brain, doesn't say it out loud, but that's what I think he was thinking.
Yeah, he knew that it was going to take a person who had had a wealth of experience and a level of statesmanship that was necessary to help guide her, because I think he knows he's dying at this stage. And
in fact,
then he does.
The next day.
He has a wonderful evening with his daughter. Margaret dies in his sleep, and the news is dispatched, and we learn that the title of the episode, Hyde Park Corner, references the death of the monarch.
It's the code word to all of the government officials. Churchill sends it out. Now, you may be thinking, Lizzie's in Kenya.
Yeah, she is. She's on her Commonwealth tour.
Yeah. Do you think they had no communication? Not the easiest in the middle of the Masai Mara in 2008 when I was there. So I can't imagine that in 1940, whatever it was. So they're trying to hold the announcement of the dead king out of respect for Elizabeth, which I thought was lovely.
Yeah.
But eventually they race to get Elizabeth to be told before the press gets there. And I think, like, according to the show, they make it like 3 minutes before, kind of thing.
Yes, not a lot of time to prepare for the fact that your father died. You're in Kenya, and you are now
the Queen of England.
The Queen of England.
And immediately people start bowing to her. Immediately it changes. She has 3 minutes on a lawn.
Yeah, and she's her private secretary comes in and says, we need to choose, as she's getting ready to leave, we need to choose your
name.
regnal name. And our ever pragmatic Lizzie says, let's not overcomplicate things. My name is Elizabeth. She could have, like her father and her uncle, chosen a different first name to be her regnal name, but she went with Elizabeth. So.
I'm really glad she didn't go with, like, Hermione or something.
I don't know what she could have possibly Victoria. She could have, I don't know.
If I had to choose between who I wanted to take over from, Elizabeth or Victoria the first, I would have totally chosen Elizabeth too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's time for the new Elizabethan era.
But what I thought in the moment where, she's told she's queen, and her private secretary and her husband both bow to her, is that's the last time she's ever allowed to fall apart.
Yeah.
Like, that's the last time she was ever allowed to be a woman. That is the last time she was ever allowed to be a human being. And it was like, I actually paused it and cried a little bit for her. Yeah. Because it's so... Women fall apart in private all the time. We never fall apart in public, right?
All the time.
Like, that's very rarely do we fall apart in public. Most of the time, we pragmatically get on with life and then cry over the kitchen sink later on that night. But this girl doesn't even have that real option.
Yeah.
And later, the first time that she really cries over her father's death is when she's completely alone with his embalmed corpse later on in the episode.
Yeah, and I thought it was really powerful, like, maintaining some small sense of individualism by choosing Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. Like, I think recognizing, maybe to a fault, that she still wants to maintain some of her old self and not completely become a new person, and not maybe recognizing yet that she can do that. But I thought she was just like, you know what? My name's Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth. Call me Elizabeth. So I loved that. I thought that was pretty, honest of her to want to still be some kind of version of the person that she was before her father died.
And then, familiar to anyone who's gone through a family tragedy, especially when away from home, the pragmatism takes over. She needs a black dress. Yeah. They have to find, like, all this stuff. When life happens, when you're making other plans, you just make it work. And that's what a lot of this episode was kind of making it work.
Yeah.
One of my favorite other lines too. So we also get a good amount of time with her grandmother in this episode.
Yeah, Queen Mary. She is something.
She talks about how she has now seen 3 great monarchies brought down by personal indulgences. So I don't know what killed her husband, but perhaps personal indulgences. I thought he died of an STD, so maybe.
It could be personal indulgence.
Clearly, Wallace Simpson is a personal indulgence.
Yeah.
And then King George's cigarettes was a personal indulgence.
Yeah. Yes, which she blames then for the lung cancer that eventually took his life.
So she is very clear that Elizabeth is to have no personal indulgences.
No personal indulgences. Yes, she writes her this letter. So when Elizabeth and Philip arrive back in England on the plane. She doesn't have a black dress with her, so they bring it on to the plane so she can change before she meets the awaiting press and politicians.
And then another, like, humanity is dead moment. Philip goes to try to help her change.
Yeah.
Because his wife's, father just died, and they shoo him out because it has to be somebody else.
It has to be one of her
dressers.
Ladies in waiting, I presume.
Philip looks like he wants to vomit, which, my husband would go bananas if someone got him out of the room at that point. So
yeah, and we see Elizabeth has a new private secretary now, who steps in, a man named Tommy Lascelles, and he seems very different from Martin, who was her private secretary. So I think we'll see that relationship. He pulls Group Captain Townsend aside and tells him, like, your job is done now. Get out. And he's like, no, I think I'm going to take a job with the Queen Mother, with Elizabeth's mother. So not quietly going into the good night.
But letting him know that everybody knows that he's stooping the sister. So, yeah.
I don't think a lot gets past Tommy Lascelles, and we learned
0% gets past Tommy Lascelles.
Quickly. Yeah. There's a reason why he's the head of the household staff.
Yeah. And now we get to the Queen Mary sends Elizabeth a letter.
Yes.
And one of the reasons we want to talk about this not only is because it's the foundation of the entirety of season 1.
Yes, it is the entire theme for season 1.
But because it's the myth that a lot of leaders are sold.
Yeah.
And what we are learning over and over again with new research is that it's actually the wrong method of leadership for today's current times. So what's in the letter?
Well, I wrote it down. This is what I do. I type things up. I take notes. So she tells her, duty calls, your people need your strength and leadership. You have to put aside, again, these personal indulgences. This is where we get the narration about her seeing 3 monarchs be brought down. But she says this is the key part, really, for the whole first season. While you mourn your father, you must also mourn someone else, Elizabeth Mountbatten. Mountbatten was her married name. For she has been replaced by another person, Elizabeth Regina. The 2 Elizabeths will frequently be in conflict with one another. The fact is, the crown must win, must always win. And that is the conflict that faces our Elizabeth, as she still tries to maintain some sense of Elizabeth Mountbatten, Elizabeth Windsor, and each time we'll realize that the crown has to win and that Elizabeth Regina now must take precedence. So it was a massive part of the whole season to end the episode with, and a really daunting task. Like, good luck, you can't be yourself ever again. But as Dr. Donnelly said, this was a very old-fashioned idea of leadership that we are now seeing no longer fits the current models. And we, in our work at Abbey Research, advocate for a much more empathetic and understanding
and vulnerability
perspective on leadership.
Strength has been seen as stoicism before, and we're now entering an era of culture where strength is actually seen as vulnerability. And so I would hope that when Prince Charles takes the throne, whenever that happens, because Lizzie might outlive us all.
For 10 days, and then he's going to abdicate because he'll be 95.
And he's going to be like, hey, guess who gets to do it now, Wills? You get to lose the rest of your hair. I think what we're certainly going to see when we get down to Prince William and Duchess of Cambridge, that it's going to be a much more vulnerable crown. That's certainly what we're seeing with Harry and Meghan, is a lot more of humanity and how do we interact with people, and you can do both and.
Yeah.
But Elizabeth had to labor for, her reign has been long, y'all. Elizabeth labored for her entire reign under this letter.
Yeah. Yeah, and because she, as we talked about, she wasn't given another model. We don't know what her upbringing was like in terms of what she was taught about how to be
it sounds like nothing.
A leader. My guess is not a lot.
It sounds like nothing.
I think she was maybe taught how to be a woman and not a leader.
I think she was probably not technically taught anything. I think she was shown, I don't know, she's so proud, it's in, the car breaks down in Kenya.
Yeah.
And she fixes it because she was a mechanic in the war.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And from what we've heard in this show and from what a lot of her biographers have said, that's kind of what she wanted was, and she says it out loud, I wanted a quiet country life.
Yeah.
I wanted a husband and children and dogs, and that was it. That's what I was born to. That's what I was told I was going to get. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And since she was 8,
That was gone.
That was gone. And it sounds like no one even tried to help her at like 8, 9, 10, be like, no, it's really gone. They just said it's gone and then did never talk about it again.
And figured,
she'd adjust to a stiff upper lip.
Eventually, she'll just figure out, because she's got so long before her dad. Oh, wait, he's died of cancer.
Oh, wait. Pause.
Oh, wait, you're 25, and now you have to be the queen with no one to help you.
And you're not allowed to talk to anyone or ask questions.
And the only person who might understand a little bit what you're going through is exiled in France, because he's not welcome. It's your uncle.
He's in New York.
Yes, but then they live in France.
They live in France.
I think they moved to France.
Also, he's the man who put you in this situation to begin with.
Yeah.
So congratulations, the person you probably hate the most in the world is the only one that can help you.
And on that note, that sums up what we've got for episode 2. Join us next for episode 3, where we will continue to have this delightful conversation about the pickle that our Lizzie has now found herself in.
In the meantime, I'm Dr. Donnelly.
I'm Dr. Hinson.
We're the good doctors of Abbey Research, and we wish you a day where you get to tell somebody that you're sad.
Because she doesn't
ever get that. Okay,
no.
bye.
Bye.